Hello and welcome to TVB News. Hong Kong reported 3,283 new COVID infections today, including 111 imported cases. 20 more patients succumbed to the virus. And starting tomorrow, no more mandatory isolation orders for COVID patients. The hospital authority has urged infected people with mild symptoms to consider consulting private doctors instead. Christy Khan reports.
The hospital authority earlier announced some adjustments to align with the government's latest policy, the scrapping of mandatory isolation orders for COVID patients from January 30th. This includes the resumption of normal services at all general outpatient clinics starting tomorrow. High-risk patients infected with the coronavirus can make a booking for consultation service at the clinics via the hospital authority's HA Go mobile app or service hotline. At the same time, some of the authorities' services such as remote consultation will be suspended. And the authorities suggest that patients with mild symptoms consult private medical practitioners who can prescribe antiviral drugs so as to alleviate pressure on public hospital emergency departments and general outpatient clinics. However, not all private clinics or hospitals welcome COVID patients showing up in person. Hong Kong Sanatorium and Hospital, a local private hospital, says it will provide remote consultation and antiviral drugs delivery services for COVID patients. It also says patients will be arranged to stay at a designated place to have remote consultation if they go to the hospital. The Hong Kong Baptist Hospital, meanwhile, suggests that infected people should go to public hospitals instead. The Hong Kong Medical Association says the city has enough capacity to handle the current COVID situation, adding that Hong Kong has more than 4,000 private medical practitioners. But the group suggests patients should make an appointment before going to the private clinics. In order to reduce the risk of transmission inside the clinics, the president of the association, Chen Chi-man, says COVID patients may have to wait outside the premises to minimize contact with others. Also, he reiterated that private doctors and hospitals cannot charge eligible residents any fees for the COVID-19 oral drugs if the medicines are supplied by the hospital authority. Christy Khan, TVB News.
China has resumed the issuing of ordinary visas for Japanese citizens traveling to the country. The move is expected to ease a diplomatic row. The Chinese embassy in Tokyo announced that effective today, the embassy and Chinese consulates in Japan will resume the issuance of ordinary visas for Japanese citizens. Earlier this month, China stopped issuing visas for Japanese nationals after Japan toughened COVID-19 border control rules for travelers coming directly from China. This after Beijing ended its nationwide zero COVID policy. Japan later lodged a protest to China over the suspension of visas. And Iranian state media reported that a loud explosion at a military plant in Iran's central city of Isfahan was caused by an unsuccessful drone attack. The announcement came amid heightening tensions with arch-enemy Israel over Tehran's nuclear program. The blast happened at an ammunition factory in Isfahan, and no casualties were reported. The factory was said to have suffered minor damage. Separately, Iran's state TV said a fire broke out at an oil refinery in an industrial zone near the northwestern city of Tabriz. It said the cause of the fire was not yet known, as it showed footage of firefighters trying to extinguish the blaze. Tabriz is some 520 kilometers northwest of Tehran. Russia has accused Ukraine of deliberately targeting a hospital in the Donetsk region, killing 14 people and injuring many others. Ukraine, meanwhile, said a Russian attack, also in Donetsk, killed 3 civilians and destroyed apartment buildings. With Western allies ready to send main battle tanks to Ukraine, reports are emerging that Kyiv is also seeking military aircraft. Nasvi Karim reports.
The US-supplied HIMARS rocket launch system is credited with helping Ukraine capture swathes of territory from Russia during a counter-offensive in the summer. The system is now being blamed for destroying a hospital in Novoaida, a Russian-held area in the eastern Donetsk region, causing more than a dozen deaths and wounding many others. The Ukraine military has yet to respond, but Russia says it's a deliberate strike and a war crime, adding those responsible will be found and held accountable. This as Ukraine says 3 civilians were killed after Russia sent a barrage of missiles, exploding drones and artillery shells on the city of Konstantinovka, also in Donetsk. More than a dozen people were injured and 4 high-rise apartment buildings were destroyed, says Ukraine military officials. The Russian strikes were likely in response to news that the Western allies were formulating a coordinated response to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's request for weapons. The United States, in a reversal, said it would send M1 Abrams main battle tanks to help Ukraine withstand an expected Russian onslaught towards the end of winter, while Germany said it would supply its long sought-after Leopard 2 tanks. The US is expected to send around 30 Abrams to Ukraine, though it may take weeks or even months to have them battle-ready because of the training involved. Reports now say Ukraine wants air support as cover for the tanks. Zelensky advisor Mikhailo Podolyak said Kiev and its allies are in fast-track talks for long-range missiles and military aircraft. Zelensky, meanwhile, has hit out at the International Olympic Committee for holding a neutral stance and saying Russian athletes may be allowed to compete at the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris. He said their presence would normalize Russia's invasion of his country, saying, "There is no such thing as neutrality when a war like this is going on. And we know how often tyrannies try to use sports for their ideological interests." Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Petr Pavel, a retired army general, decisively defeated populist billionaire Andrej Babis in a runoff vote to become the Czech Republic's new president on Saturday. Pavel will succeed controversy-courting Milos Zeman in the largely ceremonial but prestigious post. His election is expected to cement the country's pro-Western stance following Zeman's decade in office. Before the February 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Zeman divided the nation with his pro-Russia stance and support for closer ties with China. Pavel is a former chairman of NATO's military committee, the alliance's highest military body. He fully endorsed the Czech Republic's military and humanitarian support for Ukraine in its fight against Russia's invasion. The Czech president does not have many day-to-day duties, but picks the prime minister after a general election and the central bank head. The office holder also selects constitutional court judges with the approval of the upper house of the parliament. Welcome back. Former U.S. President Donald Trump kicked off his 2024 White House bid on Saturday with stops in New Hampshire and South Carolina. The events in the early voting states mark the first campaign appearances since he announced his latest run more than 2 months ago. This report from NBC News.
Former President Trump hitting the campaign trail for the first time today. The GOP presidential contest 1 year away.
This is about the beginning, you know, this is it. We're starting right here.
The former president kicking off his comeback effort with stops in 2 key early voting states.
I'm thrilled to be back in this beautiful state. South Carolina picks president.
The visits not his traditional mega rallies. But before this weekend, Trump had not held a single campaign event outside of Florida since announcing his 2024 campaign.
I'm more angry now and I'm more committed now than I ever was because
despite the multiple investigations into his family's corporation and his actions as president after the 2020 election, Trump remains the only major GOP candidate. A Morning Consult poll shows Trump nationally leading sizably in hypothetical matchups, but a poll of New Hampshire Republicans is giving DeSantis the edge in that early state. And in South Carolina, 2 notable absences from Trump's event. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott and former Governor Nikki Haley, both considering challenges to Trump.
Can I be that leader? Yes, I think I can be that leader.
Is there a chance you'd vote for a Republican that is not Trump next year?
There is a chance. It's a short list, though. I would love to see a Trump DeSantis ticket.
So Trump is your absolute number one?
Of course. No questions asked.
Donald Trump also commented on the Russian invasion of Ukraine while speaking on the campaign trail in New Hampshire.
My personality kept us out of war. And I told you before, it would have never happened with Russia, would have never gone in, Putin would have never, ever gone in. And even now, I could solve that in 24 hours. It's so horrible what happened.
And back here at home, ahead of his budget next month, Financial Secretary Paul Chan today said it may be inevitable for the government to cut some relief measures, citing an expected fiscal deficit of more than $100 billion by the end of this financial year. Christy Kahn reports.
Writing on his blog, Financial Secretary Paul Chan said Hong Kong has spent more than $600 billion on its anti-COVID work over the past 3 years. He expects the government to see a deficit of more than $100 billion in this fiscal year, adding that fiscal reserves are expected to drop to about $800 billion at the same time. The finance chief warned that the government may have to roll back some relief measures in the next financial year. However, he said the adjustments will not take place in one go, adding that the government is still closely monitoring the city's pace of economic recovery after dropping most of its COVID restrictions. And he gave assurance that the government will try to minimize the impact on the underprivileged groups despite a possible shift in fiscal policies in the future. Yesterday, Chan didn't give a clear response on whether the government will dish out another round of consumption vouchers in the next budget. Speaking on a radio program today, Executive Council convener Regina Eve said it is no longer necessary for the government to give out consumption vouchers. This as the local economy is in recovery mode. However, a local organization which assists the underprivileged today emphasized that low-income groups need help, despite any economic rebound, noting that dishing out consumption vouchers won't alleviate their financial burden. A survey conducted by the group shows that 90% of some 1,000 respondents expected cash handouts rather than consumption vouchers.
Because they think it's more feasible for them to use of the consumer voucher, and then many of them, they have difficulty to pay for their rent or the electricity, water charge, this kind of bill, and so they think it's more useful there. And besides that, the rent and the electricity fee is they must still pay, and so they need to try the way to find the money to pay. This is the concern of the grassroots people.
Meanwhile, the group also suggested the government introduce a windfall tax to increase its revenue so that more resources can be spent on improving the city's housing and healthcare problems. Christy Kahn, TVB News.
The Winghin Factory building in Sanpo Kong, where a number 3 alarm fire broke out yesterday and burned for almost 15 hours, has not yet been unsealed. Many firemen entered the building in the morning to continue their investigation alongside some personnel from the building's department. The fire broke out in an electronic parts warehouse on the 9th floor. The blaze was largely extinguished by 8 p.m. last night. Some tenants of the building planned to go inside and calculate their losses, but they were not permitted to do so. The Fire Services Department had earlier said the cause of the fire was still unknown and the building's fire alarm system was not functioning properly. The cold weather warning is still in force. Some residents went to Tai Mo Shan early this morning to watch the sunrise while hoping to catch a rare sight, frost. Temperatures in the urban areas dropped to 10 degrees Celsius in the morning and a few degrees lower in the New Territories. The observatory issued a frost warning yesterday, the first one this year. On Tai Mo Shan, the highest point in Hong Kong, the wind was fairly mild in the early morning and the lowest recorded temperature was 1 degree Celsius. Some people decided to watch the sunrise and the sea of clouds, but they failed to see any frost. At 4:30 p.m., the observatory issued another frost warning. It said the weather will be dry tomorrow with a chilly morning, but the temperatures are set to rise in the next 2 or 3 days. That's the news. Thanks for watching. Pearl Magazine is up shortly. See you then.